Welcome to the Wise Underdog channels. This is the second episode about emotions, where we will cover and talk about 12 different emotions that most underdogs suffer from or feel on a day-to-day basis. We will also discover on how to overcome and use different practical tools and framework to deal with these 12 emotions. So today we're going to talk about emotions and why are we talking about emotions. Emotions are daily currencies in our beingness, in our day-to-day existence. And it's probably occupying about 90 to 95% of our brain in our body. But nobody talks about emotions. People just bypass emotions, or they think emotions are something shallow, the opposite of logic, or people just discard and ridicule emotions. And that's not right. Emotions are the primary forces of our sensations, our perceptions, and our logic and decision in our life. And we've probably been too educated in logic. We didn't receive enough education about emotional intelligence, about emotions of other people, about our own emotions. So today, we're going to talk about at least 12 different emotions that probably have been felt so commonly by the underdogs, by any people on this planet. And we will talk about why these emotions exist and how we can overcome them. Some practical, insightful tools and tricks and tips on how to deal with them. Because with emotional intelligence, we can carve our path to success. There's a research saying IQ only determines about 10 to 15% of our success in life. The rest come from emotional intelligence and resilience. So it is very important to talk about emotions. So let's talk about emotions. So the first common emotion that most underdogs feel is not good enough. And this feeling comes from this place in ourselves that we are not worthy for who we exactly are. Because we probably feel that compared to other people that have made it, we're not the same like them. And automatically, as an underdog, as someone who has been marginalized or someone who's been underestimated, we tend to shrink ourselves. And then we doubt ourselves, and then we feel that we're not good enough to get what we want or to do things that we could do, but we sabotage ourselves, right? So that's very common, first of all, is to validate that feeling not good enough, that you're not alone to feel not good enough, that most people also, most of the time, feel not good enough. So the only way to deal with not good enough is, number one, is to find the right community of people that can accept you exactly as you are. Because from that place of full embrace of your authenticity, you organically generate self-esteem and self-worth. You immediately feel that you are good enough for whatever you want and what you think and what you dream of. So that's number one, fundamentally. Number two is you extend self-compassion and kindness and acceptance to yourself. Sometimes the root cause of not good enough is that somebody else in your life, or some people who have bullied you, think that you are less than who you are, and you internalize that message. So how do you deal with someone who has been bullied? How do you deal with a child who was rejected for who they are? You tell that person, you tell that child, hey, that's not true. We accept you. You should be proud of who you are, right? So how do we then be that person who can tell ourselves that? It's almost like a pep talk. We tell ourselves like, hey, I'm good as I am. I am exactly as I am. I can do it, and I will overcome whatever challenges that I will face. As opposed to believing what people have told me in the past, that I cannot make it, that I will not be able to make it because I'm not good enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. Like, I'm not white enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not straight enough, or whatever it is, label people impose on us, right? So that's the second one. The third one is to do a cognitive reframing. We call it the growth mindset. To think about whatever challenges that you face then, because you feel the challenges that you are about to confront, it will make you feel even worse about your self-esteem. So that means you think those challenges are a proof of your not good enoughness. You reframe that as an opportunities for growth. That it is not to make you even feel worse about yourself. It's not there to worsen your not good enoughness. It's there to even make you even stronger and better. So it's the opportunities for growth. It's called the growth mindset. So those three steps and solutions are probably one of the best ways that I have used for myself and for my clients on how to overcome the feeling of not good enough, the feeling of inadequacy that you cannot do or overcome the things that you want to do and confront. Yeah, shame. This is one of the most interesting and complex emotions that probably most underdogs relate to and can resonate with. But most people also probably feel ashamed at one point in their life, but it's more common among us, right? Shame comes from this feeling and sentences in our brain that we are wrong, that somehow we don't deserve to exist because we're just wrong. And like, I've counted more. No, I haven't counted. I probably lost count on how many times I feel ashamed of myself. Not tall enough, not good looking enough, not straight enough, not Muslim enough, not smart enough, not rich enough. Like, I'm like, somehow I'm wrong for being who I am, for just exactly where I am today, right? And that feeling is quite, I don't want to call it destructive. It can be very constrictive. It's shrinking us. It disempowers us, right? It's probably affecting our relationship, affecting our work, affecting our friendships, right? Or affecting our day-to-day basis. And the way it impacts us, this shame, is that we then sometimes sabotage our own self. In what way is sabotage our own self? That we believe that we are wrong. So we hide and block ourselves from opportunities that could be ours. Or we sabotage ourselves from relationship that we can get because we're not feeling that we are. And the only way to deal with shame is to connect with ourselves first. How do we connect with ourselves first? Is that we accept part of ourselves that are there already, and we tend to shut down and then put that on the side and discard that. Is to reclaim this part of ourselves that like, hey, come back to me. You are okay, and you are completely 100% accepted part of myself. And by connecting to ourselves, then this shame can dissipate, because the antidote to shame is a feeling of belonging. And belonging can only happen first by you accepting yourself first, and then this self-acceptance extend externally and radiate outwards to people who can reciprocate with that feeling, that they can accept you for who you are as well, that you are not wrong and you are part of us. So the belonging then is two ways, self-belonging and external belonging in a community. And that shame usually dissipates. So find the right people, find your crew, find your bros, find your, find your gente, they call it in Spanish, right? Like, find your people. I think that would be one of the solutions on how to deal with shame. Fear is the other emotions that most of us underdogs feel on a day-to-day basis. It's probably because our own life experiences being marginalized, underestimated, doubted, or rejected for who we are. And my biggest fear, and this is an example in my life, was that I will be lonely and put in the streets when I came out as a queer person. And that was not true. And this is the misunderstanding and misconception about fear, is that we have been conditioned to fear. We've been conditioned to be afraid. We were never born fearful or afraid or scared of anything. Look at any child, they will never even feel afraid to touch the fire. Of course, it will teach them lessons. But then we've been conditioned by people around us, by our teachers, by religion, by society, by our parents, by our friends, by media, mostly, right? So we live in this sort of like trap or reality that everything is scary, everything is fearful. And first step for me and for a lot of people in my life that I know as underdogs, either they're women or they're immigrants or they're gay or queer or lesbian or they're first-time founders or they are coming from poverty, is to analyze whether those fears are valid or not, and to analyze whether those fears are inherited or not. Are they taught to us? Have they been exposed and imposed to us? And then we internalize those fears. Those fears comes from stories of other people. It's not ours. And in my life, like I was always afraid that if I quit my job and start my own business, my own coaching and my Wise Underdog, if I came out as a queer person, if I move countries, I will be blah, blah, blah. I would lose my friends. I will be rejected by my parents. I will be poor. I would not have safety net. But those fears were not true. I actually had to go to therapy to talk about these fears. Like, where did this fear come from? What does this fear tell you? What scenario and stories you create in your mind about those fears? Chances are those stories is not yours. You learn these stories from other sources. So the only way to go through these fears is to confront those fears and take a deep breath and be present and then listen to your own intuition and instinct. Am I really afraid of this because I'm really afraid of this, or because my father or my mom or my brother or my friends have been telling me scary stories about these potential actions and scenarios and decisions that I'm about to make or I'm about to have in my life? And then take a deep breath. This is probably not mine. And let go and trust and surrender and go forward. Because you will not know what those fears will do to you until you take the opposite of that fear. The opposite of fear is probably courage, right? And courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is still doing things even though fear is there. So you actually embrace fear with you as opposed to reject fear. You have to embrace and feel fear and feel afraid to move forward from fear. So the only way out of fear is not to reject it or to overcome it, is to take it with you next to you and walk together forward and be brave and be courageous. So those are sort of like my insights about to overcome fear as an underdog. So you brought a very interesting point about loneliness. That's the other emotions that most of us feel as an underdog, because we always feel like we don't fit in. So when we try to fit in, we reject ourselves. So loneliness comes from this place of deep disconnection, both with other people and with ourselves. And 100% I can guarantee you, first loneliness comes from deep rejection of ourselves and deep disconnection with ourselves. Because we don't know what we want, we don't know what we are, and we probably shut down part of ourselves that should be part of ours. Because we're trying to fit in, we're trying to get approval, we're trying to be validated by people that are around us. And as you said, the story of immigrant, that's very resonant with me. As someone who lived in so many countries, so many times I felt lonely. Sometimes I feel anxiety on Saturday just because I don't have friends that I can connect with. Because even though I'm surrounded by a crowd of people, sometimes the connection is very superficial because I don't disclose myself. I don't reveal my true self because I'm afraid if I show my true emotions, my true struggles, my true feelings, they will reject me. And because of that fear of rejection, because of me also not willing to do the work to accept myself, I recreate that loneliness to myself and then to other people. So it's almost like a feedback loop, like a vicious cycle that we create with our own reality. So the solution to loneliness for us is to first do the work to accept ourselves. What part of ourselves that we shut down? What part of ourselves that we reject? And how do we embrace and accept this part of ourselves and build that deep, intimate connection with part of ourselves that we don't like, that we hate, that we are fat, we are ugly, we're not smart enough, we are poor, or we come from this family, we didn't go to the best school, da da da. Just accept that first. When you build that a lot of self-esteem, self-worth, and confidence, most of the times, the loneliness internally get reduced because you're so comfortable just hanging out with yourself, that part of you that you really hate, that you reject, right? And then because of that inner confidence, it radiates outwards. You attract different kind of people. You attract people who can accept and embrace you exactly for who you authentically are. And that deep, intimate connections then happens, not just internally within yourself, but with other people who also probably have done the work and connect with you. So there is an interconnections, right? So that means we will automatically avoid that superficial interactions in our social interactions. Because, I mean, how many times you have heard this phrase like, oh, he's so fake, or she's so fake? Because they're probably trying to pretend. They're trying to be so perfect. They're trying to portray something that is not them. And then you just engage in that superficial conversation, right? because it probably is a protection mechanism. It's try to protect themselves from not having to disclose and reveal who they truly are, because it takes vulnerability to deeply connect with yourself. So that's the other emotion that most underdogs usually feel and repress or excessively express is anger. Anger is actually a very normal feeling that we need to normalize in our day-to-day life. And it's not commonly expressed because probably most of us, because we're trying to fit in, we're trying to be somebody else, we're trying to be accepted, we adopt a good boy, a good girl syndrome. So we never upset anyone. We never express our anger. But anger is healthy and we can express it. And anger comes from a place of three sources. First is violation of boundaries, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. Second, probably unmet expectations or needs or wants. Third is mistreatment or unfair actions done to us. And when we have experienced these three sources of situations, we naturally will feel angry. When we've been bullied, when we've been rejected, when what we want is not met, we probably feel, this is not what I deserve. This is not supposed to happen. When someone hit you or whatever, like that will dehumanize you. Of course, and obviously you will feel angry. But then we tend to repress and oppress it, and then it will blow up at the wrong moment, at the wrong situation with the people that we love the most. That happened because usually anger mechanism or anger regulations is learned through the intimate interactions in our families. So how we grew up with our families and how we've been raised to deal with anger, either by our caregivers, teachers, and parents, determine on how we deal with anger in our day-to-day life. So three things that I usually teach or coach and guide myself as well to deal with anger and my clients are, first is to allow myself to feel angry, to allow that rage to come through me. And how I allow it is two things. I shake my body a lot when I feel it, and then if I can feel and find a safe space to scream and yell, just to let that huge fire inside me to be expressed, I will do it. So it's healthy. So I don't repress it. And I will just and then or take this pillow and woo, like that. That usually helps because it just moves the energy out of you. It's supposed to eat inside you. It eat yourself up from within, and it's not healthy emotionally and physically. There's so many research about how anger can cause autoimmune diseases and cancers actually. Because, and usually this is women. Women suffer a lot from repressed anger because they are socialized and conditioned to be a people pleaser. Some men are also people pleasers like me. I'm a recovering people pleaser, right? And I learned so much on how to express and manage my anger better. And the last thing that I learned is to cry. Because behind every anger is sadness. Because you probably felt sad, you were not protected when you were violated. You felt sad because nobody assured you when things go wrong, when things are not met by your expectations. You didn't have someone to tell you, hey, everything's gonna be okay. You probably felt sad when you were bullied or mistreated or didn't deserve the treatment that imposed on you. You didn't have someone to protect you. So I learn to deal with sadness now when I feel angry, because deep down, this protection of anger is just sadness. That's the other emotion that we will also talk about. So guilt is the other emotion that most underdogs feel. It's this probably come from two places or three places or many sources, but it basically associated with punishment. It's an emotion that you feel you did something wrong. This is different from shame. Shame is I am wrong, but guilt is I did something wrong. But sometimes the perception of wrong and right is also socialized, it's also conditioned, it's also taught to us by somebody else, by a system, by religion, by moral conduct, right? Which is useful to govern society. But sometimes it becomes toxic because how it show up in our life is disproportionate to the actual function of guilt. Guilt is there to regulate people's behavior so they don't do something wrong to other people. But sometimes guilt is something that we impose to ourselves for unnecessary things that we did wrong, quote unquote, right? That you said like, oh, I didn't finish my thesis and I was compared to my grandparents, I was compared to my siblings, I didn't do exactly what they have done. I feel guilty because I would not measure up to the standard that has been imposed to me. As an underdog, that's very common. We didn't measure up to what society wants us to be because it was never created to embrace our authentic full selves, because we always have to fit in. So the other aspect of guilt is that we, as an underdog, when we are successful, we keep wanting to strive more, to fight more. So we feel guilty resting, we feel guilty celebrating, we feel guilty having break. We keep hustling and fighting because we're still stuck in this mindset that like we need to keep proving ourselves. So guilt comes in. Or you feel guilty, you made it, you make $1 million, or you made financial security, you graduated the best in your university, but you feel guilty because people like you who look like you or come from the same background like you didn't make it, and you feel bad about that, right? So how do we deal with guilt? Is to forgive ourselves and to not punish ourselves and to reward ourselves, to actually celebrate ourselves when we probably already achieved certain state in our life, celebrate it. Or when we did something wrong, we make mistake, we forgive ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to forgive other people first than to forgive ourselves because we were never taught or we were never role modeled by emotionally regulated adults in our life how they can forgive themselves. And I don't know why. I think my hypothesis is that people have easier time to forgive other people because they want to stay connected to other people. But most people are disconnected from themselves, so they forget to stay connected to themselves. Therefore, they forget to forgive themselves. So that connection of forgiveness and acceptance doesn't happen with themselves. So this is the common emotions that people, an underdog, usually feel. And the only way to deal with that is to forgive. It's like really forgive and to give ourselves as well. Forgive and gift with something, reward ourselves as opposed to punish ourselves. Yeah. Anxiety comes from the place of fear, come from the place of future, come from the place of uncertainty. Anxiety comes from overthinking. It comes from ruminating things that hasn't happened yet usually. And it also happens that way because we probably grew up in an environment that make the anxiety very common as well. So when we never grew up in an environment that feel peaceful or less chaotic, organized, serene, like very serene, right? Very tranquil, like it's so easy for us to fall back to feeling anxious. So when we talk about fear of the future and fear of what will happen, our body will immediately feel anxious because we want to protect ourselves from what's going to happen. But that sensation is not grounded in reality because we live in the present moment. So probably one of the reasons why people are now feeling a lot more anxious because we've been going through a lot of crises ourselves with the pandemic, with crisis, with wars, with what's happening in humanity right now. Plus, we are bombarded with stimuli about what happens somewhere else that is not in our reality through social media, through digital technology. So it's amplified, right? And the only way to deal with anxiety is to do two things. First is to be present. Like look at your surrounding. Is there anything scary or dangerous or fearful that I should be anxious about? Because anxiety is about protecting, it's about survival. How do I make sure I stay alive if something is gonna kill me? Nothing's gonna kill you. We're not living, unless you live in a war zone, of course, or genocide. Like we are living in a place of abundance right now. Because everything is almost ready and provided for us, but we create things that is not happening yet. We create the worst case scenario. So be present first. Second, there is one breathwork technique that I really love. It's called the box breathing. It's the 4 seconds inhale, 4 second pause, 4 second exhale, 4 second pause, and then inhale again. And repeat. So inhale, pause, exhale, pause, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. So 16 seconds sort of inhalation and exhalation. This helps our nervous system and our body and brain to come back to reality, to come back to rest and digest to parasympathetic nerves. It's also helpful for us to go from going into this dysregulation about the future that hasn't happened yet, to pull ourselves back to the present moment. Hey, it hasn't happened. And the opposite of anxiety, usually, when we think about the past, we regret what we have said, we regret what we could have done, we regret what we did. So usually that's what happens. This is why a lot of Buddhist practice or mindfulness practice tell us, come back to the present moment. The present is a gift. It will help you to ground yourself to reality. So rejection, it's a very common emotion as well among wise underdogs. I mean, probably we are still being rejected for who we are in certain places, in certain environment. I mean, for me, as a gay person or as a queer person, I'm always rejected for who I am in many, many countries. I can be even persecuted for who I am. And as an immigrant, sometimes we're rejected for even finding an apartment or applying for a job. So how do we deal with rejection is to have a very strong self-esteem, right? And I will tell you a scenario when someone grew up with a very robust and strong self-esteem and self-worth. When somebody or when a situation rejects them, they don't take it personally. They take that as a redirection. They take that as a realignment. They take that as a protection. So that is important to then realize and think that why are we so bothered by rejections? Probably because we also already rejected ourselves to begin with. We probably internalize the prejudice, the misconception, the bullying, the misunderstanding about who we are as a person by the very people who misunderstand us, by the people who mistreat us, by maybe our parents, maybe our teachers, maybe our friends, maybe our enemies growing up, whoever it is that didn't accept and love us as we are. So then we build a very flimsy and very shaky self-esteem and self-worth. So every rejection that we feel from anyone, we will internalize that as an attack to our self-worth, as an attack to our self-esteem. So we then recreate the same scenario in our head that like, oh yeah, I'm worthless. I don't deserve to be accepted. I'm not worthy, right? So how do we then go about confronting this rejection? First is to accept ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, to cultivate self-acceptance, self-empathy, and self-kindness. By building that, then we build a very strong self-esteem and self-worth. But it's almost like in psychology, we call it reparenting yourself. Become your own father, become your own mother to your little self that probably didn't receive that nurturing and nourishing from your parents when they couldn't know how to deal with you when you were weird, when you were showing something that you want to express. But they're like, don't do that, don't show that, don't do this. So that's already a rejection when someone say don't, right? You already feel rejected for expressing who you are, for wanting, doing, and thinking about what you want to do, right? And that's probably the source. And that's why I think reparenting your inner child is one of the big things in handling rejection. How could you feel safe in a place that you're not safe? Yeah, go away, fly, flee. That's the easiest answer, right? But not many people are privileged to escape dangerous zone. My heart is heavy for anyone who doesn't feel safe right now, wherever they are as an underdog. Whether you're a refugee, you are a woman in a patriarchal society, whether you're a queer person in a country that persecutes you for who you are in society, or a family that persecutes you or doesn't accept you, whether you are an immigrant, whether you are coming from still living in a poverty, you feel financially unsafe, it's heavy, right? So how do we cultivate inner safety? For me, what has worked to deal with this perceived danger and threat is to rewire my brain that I'm safe. So first, of course, you need to find a safe place. And if you are in an unsafe place, find a corner. If you are in a society that is not safe for you, find a group of people who can be a safe fountain for you, a safe zone for you. Really build that external reality first, that hey, no one's gonna attack me, no one's gonna abuse me, no one's gonna bully me for being who I am, right? And then from there, you rewire your brain, okay, I'm safe in this environment. And then you rewire your nervous system in your body. that means take a deep belly breath, because this is the inner sanctum, the inner source of your own safety. Because when you're feeling unsafe or you're feeling in danger, you tend to be always probably inhaling a lot in fight and flight mode, which is sympathetic nervous system, which I already alluded to in the first video, like how do I survive now? How do I navigate this environment where it's not safe, it's dangerous, right? So you need to then down-regulate, come into your breath, come to your body in the environment where it truly accepts you and protects you, right? So in your case of in political turmoil, right? I mean, yes, in the whole macro of things, the country is in chaos, right? We've seen so many countries in chaos, but there's still pockets of safe zone with your family in a bunker, in a corner, in remote areas where you can feel safe, and then regenerate that inner safety first. Because sometimes when the external environment is completely uncontrollably unsafe, what you can do is to find your own inner safety first. And that's only can be done through changing your mind and changing your breath and changing how you perceive from within to outside. So that's the practical tools that we can adopt to deal with the feeling of unsafe. This is very common among high achievers, among underdogs, among women, among probably also queer people, right? Among probably immigrants, because they need to be perfect, to be loved, to be respected, to be seen, to be understood, to be celebrated. It comes from a place of shame. Brené Brown, this psychologist, was very famous in articulating the concept of vulnerability. She has a very famous TED Talk. Perfectionism is a coping mechanism. It's a tool to protect ourselves when we are feeling ashamed of who we are. So we will put masks that we are perfect, that we will be the best son, the best daughter, the most smart, the most successful, the most rich, the most kind, the most compassionate. Like, we will strive to be the perfect person. And guess what? That ain't real. It never exists a perfect person. We're humans. We're meant to be imperfect. And life is going to be imperfect. It's the reality of life. And it's very common to feel perfectionist because it's very common to want to protect ourselves from dealing with part of ourselves that are perceived as ugly, to deal with life that can be hard and dangerous and unsafe, to deal with our identity that nobody accepts us for who we are. So we trying to be somebody else that the society and our friends or our family can accept us, right? That if I'm gay, if I'm lesbian, I'm gonna be the smartest. If I'm an immigrant, I'm gonna be the richest. If I am coming from a lower socioeconomic background, I'm gonna be the most successful. If I am a woman, I'm gonna be the most masculine because men are more pedestalized and more praised in society, right? It's crazy how we adopt the opposite essence of who we are just to be accepted, just to be celebrated, just to survive, to live a life. But perfectionism can hit only a certain threshold. It will not carry you forward. We have to deal it differently. So how do we go about doing perfectionism? Is to, again, accept ourselves, and also forgive ourselves and accept our flaws. Like, normalize to be ugly, normalize is to make mistake, normalize to be fat a little bit, normalize to not be smart all the time, normalize not to always be successful, normalize to fail. And this is what probably prevent most underdogs to take actions, is fear of failure, because they're afraid to be imperfect. They want to be always successful because it's not perfect to fail. But guess what? That prevents us from moving forward. It prevents us from progressing in life. We sabotage our life when we're being perfectionists. I remember I was a perfectionist for sure, and the exercise that my coach told me at that time 7 years ago is to tear apart a photography that I took that win an award. Of course, this is my perfectionism mechanism. Tear it apart and post it in social media and ask people, how do you see this photo now? And surprise, surprise, most people say, oh, actually, I love this photo. And they don't even see the torn part of the picture, because I'm the one who see it and I see it as imperfect, but people see that as perfect. So there is almost a dissonance between what people see about myself and how I see myself. Because that's the exercise that we need to start keep doing, is to break our own limiting belief about what is perfect and what is imperfect. Actually, sometimes what's the most imperfect is the most beautiful. Sadness. Whew, these are very heavy emotions. I can even feel it in myself. And this just happened to be in the right moment because I've been dealing with my own sadness. And I think in our society, there is an addiction to happiness. And it's not real. It's not life. There's a saying, you cannot feel deeply happy without feeling deeply sad. And as an underdog, as a man, or any person who survived, sadness is repressed. Sadness is shame. Sadness is put to the side because it allows us to survive. And sometimes even we feel sad, we control it. And it happened to me and myself that I don't allow to cry. But guess what? Crying is the only way to deal with sadness. I mean, of course, there's other way to do it, to find people who can shoulder you when you sad. But even when you're being shouldered to cry, you still have to cry. The only expression of sadness is through tears. There is no other expression of sadness. And a lot of men and a lot of masculine women sometimes struggle with this because we've been shamed to feel sad. We've been taught to only always laugh. When you see someone crying on the street, you will look at them. Why? But when you feel when you see someone's laughing, you will want to laugh with them. Guess what? Because our society is kind of sick. We don't allow sadness. We repress it underground. And I remember one saying of my own therapist, like, Jourdan, why do you control your sadness? Why do you want to intellectualize why you feel sad? Why do you punish yourself when you cannot cry? Why don't you just sit with this sadness and allow the sadness to flow through you? Allow your body to release the cortisol, the tears, the water that's supposed to heal your sadness. Because when you repress sadness, what happens is that it becomes a reservoir of depression. When someone repress and accumulate sadness, it becomes a bank, a deposit of potential depression. Depression comes from the place of helplessness and isolation and sadness. And when you don't allow you to cry, you just want to protect yourself and then be in the corner and then like not want to feel anything because you don't allow yourself to release that tears. So I'm learning to cry. I'm learning to not shame myself. And of course, we all grew up, boys don't cry, right? Why are you crying? Don't cry. And probably our parents or our teachers also do not allow themselves or permit themselves to cry. I mean, it's even so sad for me to not to be able to feel sad. But now I'm slowly allowing myself to feel sad. I'm slowly allowing my clients to break down in front of me. I'm now so used to tears. I'm not ashamed anymore about crying because it's humanity. It's sad, and when you allow to feel sad, you allow to cry. Right now, I can feel I wanted to cry. I don't know why, but even talking about sadness makes me want to cry because I can see a lot of people suffer from it, that they don't allow themselves to cry. And they feel ashamed to cry. They feel ashamed to feel sad, that they always told to always be happy, to always smile. But guess what? That's bypassing. That's probably punishing your sadness to not even appear anymore. And it's quite dysfunctional. And that's gonna sabotage you at some point in your life. At one point, you will break down and you probably become depressed because you don't allow your sadness to appear and be friend with you. Because sadness is teaching you something. It's basically showing you something is needing to be felt because it's so sad. And sometimes sadness can be beautiful. It's the birthplace of songs, it's the birthplace of creativity, it's the birthplace of connection with other people, it's the birthplace of art and poetry and many things in life that is beautiful. So there is a concept that I really like, it's called bittersweet. Because when something is bitter, something can also be sweet. When something is joy and happy, something can be sad as well. And that combination is the essence of life, that we can feel both emotions. And without feeling both emotions, we cannot feel one of the emotions at all. So this is the last 12 emotions that we've talked today. It's self-doubt, right? How do we deal with self-doubt and what is self-doubt, right? Self-doubt is basically just the epitome or almost like a synthesis of feeling not good enough, imposter syndrome, and insecurity. So it manifests as doubt. And the only mistake when we deal with self-doubt is to believe the doubt that we feel. Because doubts come from usually an imposition and projection of other people's doubts to us. So either you believe what you've been doubted for, right? Or which is internalization of the doubt of other people, or you don't examine rigorously or analytically about the doubt that you have, because probably it comes from a place of familiar despair. What do I mean by that? People doubt something because they know it's not going to happen. They know it's not going to happen because based in the past experience, the data they have collected about their life, it hasn't never happened, right? So how do we go overcome this is to believe things differently, because our beliefs change our thinking change our emotions. So belief, thoughts, and emotions are connected. If you don't change the belief, you cannot change your emotion, you cannot change your thinking. So how do we then change self-doubt is to believe things differently. So do not believe what the doubts tell us. We have to adopt a different mindset. We have to analyze where these doubts come from. Does these doubts come from my dad, my mom, my teacher, my friend, or the media, or school, or teachers, right? Where did this come from? So stop before you believe about doubt. When you're ruminating this negative vicious cycle about negative feedback loop about, oh, I'm not going to be able to make it, oh, because I'm not going to be able to make it, this will happen. You keep doubting yourself in silence. So one practical tools to deal with this is to say it out loud and examine, is this true or not? Where does this come from? After you say it out loud, share this with someone who know about who you are and your potential and your power and capabilities, and cross-validate that with them. Hey, is this true? So that helps you to rewire and retrain your brain about what is actually true about these situations, as opposed to you immediately doubting whether you can do it or this thing will happen or not. So, and then it puts you into this negative feedback loop, right? So those are the two final steps to deal with this self-doubt, is to retrain and re-examine the belief and change the belief itself. So those are the 12 emotions that we have come so far. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. It has been a very interesting ride of up and down of emotions, where we cover everything from anger to sadness to shame to perfectionism to even self-doubt. I hope that was useful for you guys. If you feel that this is a very useful video, please share your comments below about your experience with these emotions, and share and forward this video to anyone in your life that might benefit from it, whether they're underdogs or not. So thank you so much, and see you in the next episode of the Wise Underdogs. Love, community, authenticity, and wisdom.